is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Bodies of 13 women found after migrant boat sinks in the Mediterranean. Tunisia's presidential hopeful halts campaign for ethical reasons. And Western cuisine with a touch of local flavor gaining traction in Dakar. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah, Karibe, and with me in studio is Rama with the business highlights.
That's right, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Uganda's central bank has cut its policy rate down to 9%. And Libya's state oil company is getting $1 billion in order to increase oil output in the North African economy. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. We begin tonight with yet another tragedy on the Mediterranean. The bodies of 13 women have been brought back to shore after their vessel capsized from heavy weather off the island of Lampedusa. The Italian Coast Guard received an alert late on Sunday that a migrant boat was in difficulty. Two rescue vessels found the crowded ship, which was already listing in rough seas. They picked up 22 survivors, but more are feared dead. Italian magistrates have opened an investigation into the disaster, with the magistrate from Sicily flying to Lampedusa on Monday to lead the probe. The ship, which had set sail from Tunisia, had been carrying around 50 people, almost all from Tunisia and West Africa. The number of illegal migrants found by the Coast Guard dropped by more than 40% in the first 9 months of this year compared to last year. That's according to a statement from Libya's Navy, which also criticized international organizations for not taking more action to curb illegal migration. Here's CGTN's Adil Mahri with more.
Libya's naval forces have very limited resources due to the ongoing civil war there. Yet the Tripoli-based Navy has reported significant drop in illegal migration during the first 3 quarters of 2019. According to its latest announcement this month, the number of illegal migrants found and rescued from the Mediterranean dropped by more than 43%.
The Libyan naval forces are part of the government of national accord. They don't want the war over Tripoli distract them from their mission to protect the border. It's why they've decided to focus on their own battle against illegal migration. That, along with Europe's escalated efforts, have both led to this significant drop of migrants crossing the sea.
6,835 migrants have been rescued till the end of September. That's in comparison to 12,365 during the same period in 2018. The number of drowned bodies found during the rescue missions dropped by 87%, according to the Libyan naval forces. It's a clear indication, it says, to the efforts exerted to save African lives on their way to Europe.
Italy has handed over naval units to the Libyan naval forces based on agreements to counter illegal migration. Since 2008, Italy has been committed to pay 50% of the naval technology sent to Libya, while the EU pays for the other half. The infrastructure acquired since Gaddafi remains more or less intact. It's why Libya's navy has been quite efficient lately.
While Libya is increasing its rescue missions, international organizations are decreasing their repatriation efforts. 16,000 migrants have been relocated from Libya in 2018, while this year only 4,000 have been repatriated so far.
This means that more migrants are remaining in Libya, putting financial burdens on a state that is already facing critical economic crisis. The Libyan naval forces says it's also fighting the perception migrants have that if they enter Libya, they can easily reach Europe. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Lawmakers in France are to start a debate on the hot topic of immigration. It will take place in the National Assembly, the lower house of the French Parliament. Malcolm Brown reports from Paris.
The debate comes amidst a hardening of the French government's position on the topic. Last month, the French President Emmanuel Macron warned members of his own centrist Republic on the Move party that a desire to be humanitarian had made the country too lax on immigration. He highlighted working class concerns on the topic, saying that the failure of the left to tackle the issue over decades had driven working class voters into the arms of the far right. Supporters of a tougher line argue that economic migrants from countries like Georgia and Albania are abusing the asylum system, which is designed to help those in need of protection. President Macron's hardening stance has alarmed some within his own party and immigrants' rights activists. Meanwhile, the hard-right anti-immigrant party of Marine Le Pen has accused the French president of electioneering. Elsewhere this week, European Union ministers meeting in Luxembourg will discuss a new system for handling the migrants who attempt the dangerous crossing from North Africa. Malcolm Brown, CGTN, Paris.
In Tunisia, presidential hopeful Kais Saied has halted his campaign for what has been described as ethical reasons. Saied says campaigning before the run-off vote would have created unfair advantage over jailed opponent Nabil Karoui. Tunisia's interim president has held intensive talks with the Judicial Council, the Minister of Justice and the Election Authority to guarantee equal opportunities for all candidates in the second round. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adner Shawashi.
The constitutional law teacher said he wanted to remove the ambiguity related to the lack of equal opportunities between the two candidates. Kais Saied further asserted the need to stay away from concerted efforts to intentionally strike the electoral process.
I'm in favor of equal chances. While this issue should have been addressed by the election authority from the first round of the presidential vote, I will not personally attend any presidential campaign event to preserve the election process, but I call on youths and volunteers in the regions to continue their work, which has changed the course of history in Tunisia.
Tunisian interim president noted that the fact that one of the candidates in the second round of the early presidential election is imprisoned will have consequences on the credibility of the elections, the democratic process, and Tunisia's image abroad.
Not enjoying his freedom as a presidential candidate to continue to run his election campaign has become a subject of concern, questioning and criticism in different circles and at both the national and international level.
Mohammed al-Nasser called for overcoming the situation, which he believes is likely to damage the credibility of the elections. The Union of Judges criticized the president's interference and insisted on the principle of separation of powers in Tunisia.
The judiciary system is an independent power. The interim president's comments cannot influence the court's decision. Nabil Karoui knew before announcing his candidacy that his corruption case was serious, that he could be arrested at any time. Now Kais Saied will not campaign for ethical reasons while the jailed candidate's TV and party are campaigning.
President of the Independent Higher Authority for the Elections, Nabil Bafoun, said that he informed presidential candidate Nabil Al-Karoui that he has the right to give an interview on television or in the print media in consecration of the principle of equality of chances. An election authority delegation has visited jailed runoff candidate Nabil Al-Karoui. The meeting focused on the way Karoui can campaign on equal footing with his opponent Kais Saied. It was held in the presence of the director of the prison and a representative of the General Directorate of Prisons and Rehabilitation. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Meanwhile, Tunisia is one of the most advanced countries in the region in terms of women's rights. Participation in political life is guaranteed by the 2014 constitution. However, the League of Tunisian Women Voters has revealed that women candidates topping the lists in the Sunday legislative elections represent only 14%. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi brings us that report.
The situation has affected women's participation as heads of lists for the legislative elections. Out of 1,405 lists in Tunisia and 185 lists in the constituencies abroad, 208 women top the lists, including 118 partisan, 40 independent and 50 coalition lists.
There are 7 million registered voters for the legislative elections. Women represent 49%. This is an important portion, but it's not reflected in the number of women candidates.
يعني مؤشر مهم.
At the 2014 legislative elections, 6 lists out of 59 in Manuba district were led by women. The number of female candidates for October 6 legislative elections, mostly under the age of 35, stands at 248. That is 45.25% out of a total of 548 candidates.
Tunisian women are real activists in political life and throughout the election process. We have made great efforts since 2011, but this role is often ignored by voters. Having more women at parliament is a public demand.
Kalthoum Kanno is a well-known personality in Tunisia. She has formed an independent list in Tunis 1 district. She's one of the few women topping lists in the legislative elections. The candidates list includes 5 women and 4 men. Kalthoum Kanno is a retired judge who has always sought parity and gender equality in any professional environment. Kanno claims that she is voting for change in her district and in political life in general.
I'm the candidate for women, men, old and young, but I'm determined to put forward women's interests and rights. It's unfair and unacceptable that the number of women candidates has not increased significantly.
The Sunday poll took place just weeks after the first round of presidential elections, when voters turned their backs on ruling and opposition parties in favor of independent candidates, especially women. Activists aim to ensure women have a stronger voice in politics. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Rights group Amnesty International has accused the government in South Sudan of failing to take action against perpetrators of atrocities committed during the country's 5-year civil war. In the new report, the rights group interviewed 47 people working in the country's justice system. It found that the justice system in South Sudan has been crippled by a lack of independence. The rights group says prosecutors only follow the directives of the executive and in the absence of such directives do not investigate serious crimes. At present, President Salva Kiir can confirm or reject judgments by the military courts, effectively giving him veto powers over what is supposed to be an independent judicial process. Around 4 million people have been forced out of their homes by conflict between warring factions across the East African nation. CGTN's Patrick Oyet is in Juba. He has been following up that story for us and joins us live for more. Patrick, rights group Amnesty International is accusing the government there in South Sudan of failing to take action against perpetrators of some of these atrocities we know that happened there. What is the situation on the ground?
Yes, Peninah, you know, the government here has said, yes, 5 years of war, there are atrocities that have been committed, there are crimes that have been committed, but the government is saying it is doing something. The government is citing the case of a terrain hotel where in 2016 government troops went there, raped women, killed some people, and also looted property. Those people have been prosecuted, convicted, and the government is citing that as a case in point where it has taken action. Now, when war has been on in a country such as South Sudan for 5 years, of course, there is no rule of law. This is obvious. This is a statement of fact. There is no, of course, accountability. A lot of problems are there. There is no constitutionalism. These things are there. These are statements of fact. These are things that happen. But the government is saying, yes, these things are happening, but they are prioritizing peace rather than justice. They're saying, first of all, what they want to do is to implement the current peace agreement, make sure that peace returns to the country, and then after that, they can go to things like justice, where they say even the peace agreement, Chapter 5, provides for formation of a hybrid court. Later, a hybrid court would be formed, and the suspects in this conflict would therefore be tried in a competent court. Now, the issue where people are so much concerned about here is where a general commits atrocity and tomorrow that general is appointed as a minister because there is a deal between that general and the government, and there is no justice system that, you know, tries this general for atrocities that he is alleged to have committed. But now the government is saying the challenge it has is that with the current situation where there are so many factions fighting the government, if you move too fast to prosecute a general in the army, then that general has some following. Possibly the general will rebel with his followers and you create another rebellion. So basically they're saying they are prioritizing peace and later justice will come. They're saying, yes, war is clear. When war is there, people get killed, human rights violations take place, people get maimed, but we are prioritizing peace, let peace come, and then the rest will follow. This is what they are saying, Peninah.
Okay, so peace taking precedent over anything, any other, I don't know, I should say, any other action, but are there other reasons beside what the government is saying, prioritizing peace, that is making authorities fail to prosecute and punish these perpetrators of crimes?
Yes, the government is saying it is trying at its own level. For example, as I said earlier, they talked of the issue of terrain where they tried several people. These people have been convicted. They are now serving their sentences. Currently, they are also saying there are people who are actually standing trial, especially those on the government side, the government soldiers. But the question they are asking us is, okay, now, for example, there are generals who are in the opposition. They are also accused of atrocities. They have committed atrocities. They are supposed to be tried. Where are we going to get them? How will we bring them to face the justice system? So this can only happen when, you know, peace is now being implemented. All the parties are here in Juba. They are together. We are working together. We set a justice system which is acceptable to all of us, and then we can go ahead and prosecute whether these people are in opposition or they are in government. That time it will be easier. But if you start it now, then you may actually just make the whole peace deal collapse. This is what they're telling us.
All right, Patrick, thank you for that. Patrick Oyet live in Juba. Now, the United Nations has urged Somali leaders to resolve a standoff between the central government and the regional states. In August, Somalia failed to endorse the election of Jubaland's leader after it failed to meet the required standards. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has more.
The new guidelines were announced by the Ministry of Interior and Federal Affairs. The 7-page document highlights a detailed procedure on the manner in which regional elections will be conducted in the Jubaland state. 2 months after parallel elections saw 3 leading candidates claim victory in the regional leadership race. Mogadishu has vowed not to recognize the election of all 3 individuals, claiming to be duly elected regional leaders. Instead, it wants a transparent, free and fair election by end of 2019. The inauguration of Ahmed Mohamed Islam as Jubaland leader has failed to take place on more than one occasion in the port city of Kismayo. The central government here in Mogadishu has imposed an air blockade in the port city of Kismayo, restricting Mogadishu-based opposition politicians from attending Ahmed's inauguration. A former Somali president was barred last month from flying to Kismayo, and on Saturday a chartered flight flew directly from Nairobi to the port city, carrying lawmakers and former regional leaders, defying an early existing ban imposed by the Somali Civil Aviation Authority. Recent developments in the region have caused concerns among Somalia's international partners.
We appeal to Somali leaders as a matter of urgency to repair the fraught relations between the federal government and some federal member states. We also encourage use of dialogue and pragmatic solutions to resolve tensions in Jubaland to ensure they do not impede other priorities.
For now, it remains to be seen if the current leaders in Jubaland will heed the calls from the government and the UN to restart the electoral process, or whether it will push through with the planned inauguration.
Regional states cannot dictate terms and conditions to the government. The elections did not happen according to the required standard. That is evident. The international community also objected the electoral process in Jubaland and called for consensus before regional elections.
The central government has been at loggerheads with several regional administrations. The fallout is mostly caused by disagreement over resource sharing and elections. Experts now warn that the political fallout risks reversing gains recorded on the ground, including security and the fight against terrorist groups causing havoc in the country. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
This is Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. Sources of solar energy gradually replace costly diesel generators in Nigeria. And Medicine Sans Frontières opens a clinic in Kenya to respond to growing number of heroin users.
The newly upgraded CGTN website offers optimized coverage of China and international affairs, as well as distinct voices from around the globe. Be the first to know the biggest political news and discover the background to the major decisions. Decode China with a different perspective and get a better understanding of how China sees the world. Go beyond the news with sharp opinions on the events shaping today's world and reveal a China you have never seen before. Listen to entrepreneurs for in-depth analysis of the economy and touch the pulse of new technology via our hands-on videos. Travel back in time with CGTN to learn about China's past and immerse yourself in Chinese culture. To discover the stories behind Kung Fu. Get the latest news on Chinese lifestyle, including travel, sports, and nature. Regular productions including Ask China put high-ranking officials on the spot, while C-Lab presents new ways of storytelling via cutting-edge technologies, and Global Stringer delivers unique videos from China and beyond. Take a look at the world from a different angle. See the difference.
With poor electricity supply from the national grid in Nigeria, most businesses and households in the country rely on generators for power. But as people tire of the noise and pollution, many are now turning to solar energy, an alternative that is cleaner, quieter and cheaper in the long run. CGTN's Deji Badmas has more.
Inside this bakery known as Fifi's Oven in Lagos, the workers are hard at work. Every machine being used here needs electricity to function. Without it, the bakery would be out of business. But guess what is powering the operation here? It is this small generator. It's annoyingly noisy and disturbs everyone. But they've got no choice.
And guess what? They've been running on generators since morning, from 8 a.m. to past 6 p.m. that I am now speaking. So it gives you an idea of how terrible the electricity situation here is, and it's a process that goes on almost on a daily basis, so they have to run constantly on generator just to get power supply to do their business.
Overusage has been hurting us. There was a time we actually used the generator for a long time that it blew up. We were using the petrol generator. We had to buy another one.
And we have a smaller generator. And we also
Rashid works for an internet service provider. He oversees operations at one of his company's base stations, which requires 2 generators and a battery inverter to run.
For most of the time, do you run on these generators and inverter, or you run on public power supply? For how many hours would you say you run on electricity a day?
Actually, if I may give you an example, for the past 2 months, we hardly run on national provided electricity at all because of the erratic nature of the power supply. So we run 24/7 on our generators and the power inverter backup.
And that's serious. It must be costing you money to do that.
Yeah, 24 hours is like 50 liters of diesel per day. And if you factor that into how much we're spending on diesel alone, not to talk about
and
the
that's for the diesel generator, not to talk about the petrol generator.
Yes, and for the diesel, that's about almost 11,000 naira every day.
It's estimated that about 60 million Nigerians own generators, including 26% households and 86% businesses. And with just between 3,500 to 5,000 megawatts of power available daily from the national grid, it's practically impossible to run a business in this country, no matter how small, without a generator. Solar inverter systems, which are cleaner and non-polluting, are beginning to make an inroad in Nigeria. Solar panels are popping up on rooftops across the country, but the high cost is inhibiting its wide usage.
But when you look at the cost over a period of time, say a year or two, you'd find out that what you would have spent on maintaining your generator in terms of fuel, maintenance costs, changing oil and all that, you would have spent it once on inverter, and then over time you don't spend anything else.
Some solar system merchants are offering flexible payment options to make it easier for people to acquire solar technology for their power need. And because of that, the numbers are gradually going up.
Between buying generators and fueling them, Nigerians are spending $20 billion a year. To put it into perspective, that's 5% of our entire GDP. What would happen if we could eliminate that cost? And that's why what you're going to see begin to happen over the next year, next 2 years, is the pace at which solar systems are going up is going to become overwhelming. And of course, more installations begets more installations.
Solar system appears to hold the answer to Nigeria's perennial electricity challenge. So it might indeed just be a matter of time before solar system takes over from these noisy and polluting generators. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
China Global Television Network Europe took to the air on Monday with the first live broadcast from London. It's CGTN's third production center outside Beijing, joining existing hubs in Nairobi and Washington, D.C. CGTN's Paul Barber reports.
CGTN Europe will bring news and features from across the continent as the network expands its global coverage of original journalism. The London hub will serve as a base for correspondents to cover an area often overlooked, with in-depth reports from Central and Eastern Europe.
CGTN Europe.
From a state-of-the-art facility, CGTN Europe's flagship weekday programme, Global Business, will offer up-to-date coverage of the latest economic trends and developments. Weekend broadcasting will include The World Today, a 30-minute roundup of the biggest stories from Europe and around the globe. A weekly talk show, The Agenda, and Razor, a show dedicated to cutting-edge science and technology, complete the lineup. CGTN Europe also has a presence on all major digital platforms, covering everything from major geopolitical developments to social and cultural trends. Paul Barber, CGTN, London.
Meanwhile, in Cote d'Ivoire, a conference on women in data science has been held in the capital, Abidjan. The event targeted women across multiple industries spanning business, agriculture and fashion. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more.
With almost 300 Ivorian women from all walks of life, it's the first ever Women in Data Science conference. They are gathered here in the capital, Abidjan, to understand how they can use data to grow their businesses.
For years, I have been working in the industry of processing of cassava and many other foods, but I never used data because I did not know the importance. Today, during the training, we learned about the importance of the data.
I'm setting up a business that focuses mainly on decoration. I did not know that data could exist in this field, but now I will start collecting data to be better informed and know how to guide my customers via the internet.
The conference focusing on women was facilitated exclusively by women. It touched on the power of data in decision-making and corporate leadership.
The purpose of this conference is to understand the needs of women so that together we can formulate appropriate strategies and platforms to teach women how to use data to develop their activities.
In addition to the panels and workshops, the conference also hosted a hackathon. The goal was to develop an app that helps women in their daily lives.
Today we have presented an app that can help pregnant women. It will remind women of their post and prenatal appointments, help them with pregnancy planning, and provide other information on pregnancy. The app can also be used by hospitals to collect data such as patient names and phone numbers.
Following the success of this conference, the organizers are now eager to host more capacity-building events focusing on women in data. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
South Africa has passed a law to criminalize the spanking of children. This move has sparked debate among other countries, with some calling for similar legislation. But what about Egypt in North Africa? Yasser Hakim has more.
Spanking has been normal in the upbringing of children in the Arab world. It's considered much softer than beating and is accepted even by some children themselves.
My father only spanks me when I do something very bad, but it's very rare.
I would do the same to my kids, but only if they did something extremely bad.
I agree to criminalize it because it's wrong and can be psychologically harmful. It will create a child who will be violent when he grows up.
According to experts, there are no clear laws to prohibit spanking or beating children at home.
Article 60 in the criminal law is quite elastic and can be understood to avoid punishment if the child has no critical injuries. There is only punishment if the child is beaten to death or has a critical injury. In case of injury, the sentence is a maximum of 7 years in prison. In the case of death, the sentence is a maximum of 15 years.
Parents would tell you they are against spanking, but they fell short of approving a law to penalize it.
Beating children is unacceptable. Even in our religion, it's prohibited to beat your child. Spanking will create a lot of problems and will need to change our cultures and traditions. I don't think it's feasible. A kid can wrongly accuse his parents of beating him.
There is no official statistics on children abuse in the family. However, there are efforts to create awareness.
The civil society is constantly working on awareness campaigns against child abuse, and the National Women Council gives continuous workshops and trainings on how to protect children from abuse at home. Unfortunately, the traditions are deeply rooted and will take a long time to change this culture.
It's important to note that society here differentiates between beating and spanking. While beating is unacceptable, spanking is still widely used, especially in rural areas and Upper Egypt. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The number of Kenyans using drugs has risen by more than 50% in the past 8 years. That's according to the country's health ministry, which also reports that the majority of users inject heroin. Medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières opened a clinic this month in Kiambu, 20 kilometers north of the capital Nairobi, where former heroin users receive daily methadone doses alongside counseling and care for HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis and hepatitis.
Kenya's Ministry of Health says it is alarmed by the growth in the number of injecting drug users in the country, saying this is a problem that has been growing for the past 80 years and one that demands urgent response. Many of these profiled users are youths driven to heroin by peer pressure and the stress of poverty and joblessness in the country.
I started methadone because I'm not totally broke with no income. I'm not able to make ends meet, so I needed assistance to help me out of the habit.
Scoring heroin is not difficult. The port city of Mombasa is a growing hub for drugs from Afghanistan bound for the West. According to the United Nations, a single heroin dose costs about 150 Kenya shillings, approximately $1.45, roughly one-fifth the average price of a single dose in the United States. Non-profit Médecins Sans Frontières recently opened Kenya's first clinic in Kiambu, 20 kilometers north of the capital, Nairobi. It offers a lifeline to recovering heroin addicts who enroll in the treatment program, which gives them access to free methadone daily to treat heroin users with no limit for when they are weaned off. However, this option eliminates cravings and withdrawal symptoms.
The withdrawal symptoms are so bad because at times you feel there's a fever, there's a stomach ache, you feel your body has a lot of pain. You have a lot of pain in your body, mostly at the back joint, at the backbone. Headaches, stomach aches. You can't do anything. You can't do anything without them.
Jason takes his daily methadone dose at the Médecins Sans Frontières clinic because it is closer to his home than the clinic he began with. There, they offer additional psychological counseling, care for other diseases such as HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis and hepatitis that present with most addicts.
We are offering an integrated approach, all services under one roof. I think it will offer what the patients require in terms of, for example, if they need HIV care, if they need TB treatment, if they have the methadone, we have it here, hepatitis C treatment, everything.
For 26-year-old Peter, Methadone granted him a second chance with his wife, who now trusts him to walk 10 minutes from their home to the clinic with their 2-year-old daughter. A stark difference evidenced by the support offered. But the memory of that life is still very clear.
I'm pleading with the youth that I would like to tell them not to smoke heroin again, because it is not good. It kills you slowly while you are still alive. It makes you desperate, and you would go to any extent just to take it.
The daily dose of methadone has given the addicts a chance at life one day at a time. And for now, the daily dose keeps them alive, giving them hope away from the ever-present snare of addiction relapse. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Let's now catch up with the day's business news, and for that we cross over to Rama.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in business. Uganda Central Bank has cut its policy rate down to 9%. And Libya's state oil company is getting $1 billion to invest in boosting oil output.
At the Great Wall of China.
Ni hao.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's head over to Uganda. The central bank over there has cut the policy rates down to 9% from 10% after it says economic activity slackened a bit. Now, the cut is the first time the policymakers over there have cut the rate since a 100 basis point hike in October last year. Emmanuel Tumusime Mutebile, the bank's governor, said the benign outlook for inflation had also provided a bit of room for easing. Now, the bank targets a medium-term core inflation rate of about 5%. In the meantime, the central bank has licensed 2 new banks. It brings the total number of commercial lenders serving the East African coffee producers' economy to 26. These banks join a market which some analysts say is already way too many for a $26 billion economy, and it includes the local unit of South Africa's Standard Bank, which dominates the market. Over in North Africa, Libya's National Oil Corporation has gotten about $1 billion from the internationally recognized government to boost its operations. According to a resolution shared by the government, the latest cash infusion will be used to maintain the state-owned company's oil production in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Over the past years, NOC has frequently complained that it was not getting enough funding from the Tripoli-based government of national accord. At the moment, Libya's current oil production is about 1.3 odd million barrels of crude a day. But last week, NOC disclosed that figure will become severely affected if it does not get the budget that it needs to run operations from the government. Shifting now to another commodities producer, this time Africa's biggest copper producer, the DRC. The International Monetary Fund is apparently considering a new financing partnership for the country. The lender says it will examine within the next 6 months a short-term program for the Congo. In 2015, the IMF halted a $532 million 3-year loan program for the cash-strapped copper producer. That decision came after the former Congolese president, Joseph Kabila, failed to publish details of a 2011 mining deal. But now the current head of state, Felix Tshisekedi, is seeking to mend ties with the IMF following renewed discussions between the two sides. On to Zimbabwe now. The price of petrol has gone up yet again, this time by more than 25%. This is the latest blow in a country that's battling out of control inflation. The Zimbabwean Energy Regulatory Authority announced the price of diesel would rise to $16.64 a litre. That of petrol will go up to $14.97 a litre. Now, those prices, a full tank of petrol basically costs more than a month's salary for a cook or maintenance worker, and more than half of a month's salary for a doctor on the public payroll. Already in January, the government almost tripled petrol prices, and it has regularly increased the prices since then. According to the International Monetary Fund, the prices have gone up by nearly 300% year on year in August. Analysts at Bloomberg put headline inflation at 900%. The 5th edition of the African Rethink Awards, organized by the Land of African Business, concluded on Friday in Abidjan. That event held during the first edition of the African Innovation Week is aimed at developing African entrepreneurs to become experts and gain international recognition. CGTN's Alexander Majala has more.
Organized under the theme Investing in Africa, Investing in the Future, the 5th edition of the African Rethink Awards aimed to identify, analyze, promote, and reward the best startups run by young African entrepreneurs. 31 startups, including 11 Ivorian ones, competed for 3 prizes: the Grand Prize, the Women's Entrepreneurship Award, and the Incentive Award. But beyond the awards, the networking opportunities offer something even more valuable.
A young boy from the Democratic Republic of Congo named Peninah won the Incentive Award. He transforms banana leaves into totally biodegradable bags. He received 2,000 euros. But what is great is that in that room, a former winner of the Angie Frederic Balmer, promoter of the startup Lifefield in Cote d'Ivoire, decided to top up his 2,000 euros by a check of 20,000 euros. Following Mr. Balmer, other partners have also invested in his startup. Finally, this young boy will go back to the DRC thanks to the ARA with 54,000 euros, just what he needed to get his startup off the ground.
This is the first time that I have participated in an international competition. It is true that at national level, I have already won some awards, but the ARA 2019 award will boost my business. Here in Abidjan, I met a lot of contacts, and thanks to this competition, I have investors for my company. It gives me a lot of motivation to go further, to persevere to reach my goals.
During the 2-day event, the project promoters and all startups present had the opportunity to meet and establish contacts with a dozen European and African investors. In addition to meetings, they were trained and coached on fundraising techniques and skills development. More than 200 participants from 23 countries in Africa and Europe took part in this 5th edition of the ARAs. The next edition will be held in Abidjan in October 2020. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Now, dozens of climate activists have taken to the streets around the world this week as they seek to challenge governments to take concrete action to reduce the effects of climate change. The protesters say that mass civil disobedience is the only effective means left at their disposal in order to force political action. Here's CGTN's Alexander Majala with more.
Extinction Rebellion turns 1 this month, but the movement has little time for retrospection. Instead, the environmental group is planning its biggest act of civil disobedience to date, a worldwide campaign that aims to paralyze dozens of cities across the globe.
I have got 4 small young children, and I want to be able to look them in the eye when they're adults and tell them that when I found out the extent and the severity of the crisis that we are in for our climate and our ecological systems, that I did absolutely everything within my power to be able to try and reverse that and do what I can to change that.
Today, Extinction Rebellion's biggest achievement arguably came in early this year. In April, the group's activists occupied 4 sites in the British capital of London, leading to the arrest of more than 700 demonstrators. However, this time round, Extinction Rebellion says its campaign, which is scheduled to kick off today, will be much bigger and better organized. According to the movement, governments are yet to meet their demands.
We don't want to be disruptive, we just want climate action, but nothing else has worked so far.
The campaigners want countries to declare a climate and ecological emergency. They also say greenhouse gas emissions must be reduced to 0 by 2025.
And our governments are lying to us about the state of the climate and ecological emergency. It's time for action, and it's time for the Australian public to be able to understand the message that our government is not telling us for their own interests.
The major events planned around the world include Australia, Germany, Spain, and the United States, among others. The global action follows similar worldwide demonstrations by youth activists. Last week, hundreds of thousands of young people around the world took part in strikes to demand action on climate change. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Let's get into tech now. GTEX, the biggest tech show in the Middle East and North Africa, is underway in Dubai. One topic that's taking center stage is the rollout of commercial 5G networks in the region. Huawei tech is already being utilized by the UAE and Bahrain as Gulf countries look to expand their 5G infrastructure. Jacob Greaves sat down with Huawei's vice president for its global wireless network to discuss the tech giant's regional strategy.
When we speak of 5G, what changes do you perceive it bringing to industry here and around the world?
Let me tell you that 5G plus cloud, edge and AI, they are the transformative technologies. They represent the hope. The hope for people like us to live better, the hope for enterprises to have better business economics, and also the hope for countries for economy. So I think what you will see expansion in some industries, and you will see more productivity. We can talk things about smart cities, safe cities. That represents a lot of capital and a lot of GDP growth. Health industry, financial industry. So those are all very important.
And what stumbling blocks remain ahead of 5G's more widespread implementation, both here in GCC and much more broadly?
Talking about the future industry applications, of course, things come with kind of little challenges, like operators need to adapt their solution to serve enterprises. And also we are Huawei, we're working a lot to get the ecosystem, inclusive ecosystem for services and applications. We have a lot of partners because that's what it takes for success in the Middle East.
Now, US officials have raised concerns about allies, including those here in the Gulf, using Huawei's 5G infrastructure. What do you say to those concerns?
Well, there are three things. Number one, these security concerns in general about the services are valid concern. Because remember, when 5G comes in, 5G by itself is secure. But when 5G comes in, it opens the way to a lot of services, and all of those services, they increase the number of vulnerability for the bad guys to come in. So the security concern is not about Huawei or certain vendor or certain technology. It's about how you should build an end-to-end security framework that is integrated in your solution. This framework needs to be verified and inclusive. It doesn't have to be like just for certain vendor or vendors from certain countries. So we have to take a pragmatic approach. My say on this is we should not hype it up or hype it down. Security needs to be built in operators' daily activity, because these operators, they already have a lot of experience in running their network. They have been doing this for years successfully, so why should we worry now? And even in Huawei, we have been supporting for many years, for like serving 3 billion people. So I don't think it's valid for Huawei, and we all know it is related to politics and trade war globally. So, and that's one of the challenges, by the way. You asked me about challenges. I think we cannot decouple now the political situation from technology situation, unfortunately, and that's a really bad thing, and it will prevent more innovation to come into the ecosystem.
On to Senegal now. Western cuisine is gaining a bit of traction in the capital, Dakar. Restaurants are adding a touch of local flavour to the dishes on offer, and they're becoming an interesting and affordable snack. Here's CGTN's Laura Olubengo with more.
This restaurant in Dakar opens its doors in the afternoons. The venue is located in a public garden and is very popular with the locals.
We can accommodate more than 100 customers per day. Most of them eat the fataya and the local hamburger. Moreover, our roadside setting attracts many customers who like to come and sit here, eat and have fun while enjoying the environment and the garden's atmosphere. The quality of our food is also highly appreciated, and this provides us with constant income that allows us to manage the fast food business and pay our employees.
Many come here for its Western specialties that have been adapted to the local market. From fataya to local hamburgers, the customers are spoiled for choice.
What I just ate is called fataya. It's a very popular delicacy here in Dakar. It's good to eat it in the evening because it's easy to digest. There's also the fact that it's affordable and everything it contains in terms of ingredients such as eggs, mayonnaise, ketchup sauce, all in a well-cooked flour-based bread. So it's all this together that makes eating fataya a pleasure.
Every night I have a hamburger. It's something I really like, especially because of its ingredients. It contains eggs, salad, and also tomato. One can almost say that all Senegalese people love this food. It's not too expensive, so we prefer to eat it than buy food that is too expensive and too heavy to digest at night.
Food costs between $1 and $2, making it affordable to locals who have a distinct taste. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back with Global Business a little later. For now, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports. Eliud Kipchoge off to Vienna to attempt a sub-2-hour marathon run.
Africa Live. Find your voice.